Zenith Accord floated in the blackness between star systems like a cathedral made of light and steel. It was the Galactic Council's masterpiece, a station where wars ended and treaties began, where 47 species gathered under one rule that had kept the peace for 14 years. No weapons allowed. Not plasma rifles, not monoblades, not even ceremonial daggers. Nothing that could kill, nothing that could break the fragile thread holding 1,000 worlds together. Security Chief Vorath stood at the primary airlock, all four arms crossed behind his back, his chitinous plates gleaming under the sterile white lights. He was Kryn, a species bred for enforcement, and he took pride in his record. 14 years, 0 incidents, 0 exceptions. He had scanned warlords, stripped crime lords, and disarmed diplomats from species whose entire culture revolved around personal arsenals. Every single one had walked through his checkpoint naked of violence. The human was scheduled to arrive at 0600 station time. Vorath had read the dossier 3 times. Kai Mercer, Earth military, honorably discharged, no criminal record, no flagged augmentations. She was here as part of humanity's application to join the Council, a symbolic gesture of trust. Vorath didn't trust gestures. He trusted scanners, protocols, and the cold logic of physics. If it could hurt someone, his equipment would find it. The airlock hissed open. Kai Mercer stepped through, and Vorath's first thought was that she looked too small to be dangerous. She was human average height, wiry in build, with dark hair pulled back tight and clothes that hung loose on her frame. But it was her hands that caught his attention. Burn scars traced her knuckles like old poetry written in pain, and when she met his gaze, her smile was the kind that never reached her eyes. It was the smile of someone who had walked through fire and decided not to tell anyone how much it hurt. Chief Vorath, she said, her voice low and steady. I'm here for the treaty signing. Vorath gestured to the scanning arch with 2 of his arms. Standard protocol. No exceptions. I wouldn't expect any. Kai stepped forward without hesitation, spreading her arms as the scanners hummed to life. Green light washed over her body in waves, peeling back layers of clothing, skin, bone. The screens beside Vorath flickered with data. No metal, no ceramics, no concealed energy cells. He ran it again, then a 3rd time, because humans were new to the Council and their biology was still poorly understood. Some species could grow weapons from their own bodies. Some could store toxins in glands no scanner could detect, but Kai Mercer came back clean every time. Vorath nodded slowly. Remove your jacket, your boots, and your belt. Place them in the bin. She complied without argument, stripping down to a simple black shirt and pants. The jacket went into the bin. The boots followed, the belt was last, and Vorath noticed her hesitate for just a fraction of a second before letting it go. He made a note of that. Hesitation meant attachment. Attachment meant something worth hiding. He scanned the items separately. Nothing, just fabric and synthetic rubber. Vorath's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. You may proceed to the guest quarters. The treaty signing begins in 4 hours. You are not to leave the residential sector until then. Kai picked up her belongings, dressed in silence, and walked toward the inner station without looking back. Vorath watched her go, that faint unease still scratching at the base of his skull, but the scanners had cleared her. The protocol was satisfied. He returned his attention to the duty roster. 3 more delegations were arriving today, and 2 of them were from species with a history of smuggling toxins in their respiratory systems. He didn't think about Kai Mercer again until the alarms started screaming. It happened 4 hours later, exactly as the treaty signing was scheduled to begin. Vorath was in the security hub, reviewing surveillance feeds from the council chamber, when every screen in the room flashed red. Proximity alerts, hull breach, unauthorized ships. His forehands moved across the controls in a blur, pulling up external cameras. 3 Zelthian assault frigates had dropped out of faster-than-light travel less than 500 meters from the station, their weapons hot, their transponders dead. Lock down all airlocks. Vorath barked at his team. Activate defense grids. Get me a channel to the explosion. Cut him off. It wasn't loud, not in the vacuum of space, but the station shuddered like a living thing in pain. Vorath's screens flickered as emergency power kicked in. One of the Zelthian ships had fired a breaching charge directly into the council chamber's outer hull. Not enough to destroy the station, but enough to crack it open like an egg. His claws dug into the console as he pulled up the internal feeds. Zelthian enforcers poured through the breach, 24 of them in black combat armor, moving with the precision of a military unit that had done this before. They sealed the breach behind them with foam canisters, trapping the atmosphere inside the chamber, trapping everyone inside. Vorath's blood turned to ice as he counted the hostages. 200 delegates, 47 species, the entire Galactic Council leadership, gathered in one room for a ceremony that was supposed to symbolize peace. The lead Zelthian removed his helmet. Vorath recognized him immediately. Kreeth, a warlord who had been exiled from the Council 5 years ago for war crimes. He was holding a dead man's switch in one hand and a kinetic grenade in the other. The kind of weapon that didn't care about shields or armor. It just turned everything in a 50-meter radius into red mist. Kreeth's voice crackled over the station-wide channel. Zenith Accord, this is a hostage situation. You will meet our demands, or I will detonate this device. You have 6 hours. Do not test me. Vorath's mind raced. Protocol said to evacuate non-essential personnel. Protocol said to contact the nearest military fleet. Protocol said to negotiate, to buy time, to wait for reinforcements. But the nearest fleet was 8 hours away, and Kreeth had only given them 6. His team was staring at him, waiting for orders, and Vorath felt the weight of 14 years of perfect peace crumbling in his hands. Then one of his officers spoke up, her voice shaking. "Sir, we have a problem." There was a human in the council chamber. She was early. Vorath's heart stopped. He pulled up the chamber feed, scrolling back through the footage. There, Kai Mercer, sitting in the guest observation section, 3 minutes before the breach. She had been early, she had been waiting, and now she was trapped inside with 200 other beings and a warlord holding a bomb. He rewound the feed further, watching her enter the chamber. She had walked in with nothing, no bag, no equipment, just herself. She sat down, folded her hands in her lap, and waited with that same faint smile that never reached her eyes. Vorath felt the unease return, sharper this time, cutting through his panic like a blade. The human was unarmed. She had been scanned 3 times. She had nothing that could break the siege, nothing that could fight back. But as he watched her on the screen, sitting perfectly still while chaos erupted around her, Vorath remembered something from the human dossier, a phrase buried in the psychological evaluation section, something about human military training, something about adaptive lethality. He pulled up the full file, his claws trembling as he scanned the text, and there it was, buried in a footnote written by a xenobiologist who had studied Earth's military history. Human soldiers are trained to weaponize their environment. In the absence of tools, they weaponize themselves. Vorath looked back at the screen. Kai Mercer was gone. The seat where she had been sitting was empty. He cycled through every camera in the council chamber, searching for her, but she had vanished into the chaos like smoke. His team was shouting questions at him, asking for orders, but Vorath couldn't answer. He was staring at the empty chair, at the burn scars he had seen on her knuckles, at the smile that had never reached her eyes, and he realized, with the cold certainty of a predator recognizing another predator, that he had made a terrible mistake. He hadn't confiscated the weapon. He had stripped away everything that made her predictable, everything that made her safe, and then he had let her walk into the most dangerous room on the station with nothing but herself. Vorath's mandibles clicked once, a sound his species made when facing an opponent they knew they couldn't beat. He opened a priority channel to the Council's military command, his voice steady despite the fear crawling through his veins. "This is Security Chief Vorath of Zenith Accord. We have a hostage situation. Zelthian extremists, 200 captives, 1 human." The officer on the other end asked the obvious question. "Is the human armed?" Vorath looked at the empty chair one more time, and then he answered with the only truth he had left. "I don't think it matters." Kai Mercer disappeared into the ventilation system 30 seconds after the breach, while the delegates were still screaming and the Zelthians were still shouting orders. No one saw her go. No one thought to look up. Most species didn't think vertically when they panicked. And the Zelthians were too busy corralling hostages to notice the access panel in the corner sliding shut without a sound. The ductwork was narrow, cold, and built for maintenance drones, not living beings. Kai's shoulders scraped against the metal as she pulled herself forward, using her fingers and toes to grip the seams where panels joined together. Zero gravity made it easier. Her body remembered the training from years ago. The endless hours in simulation chambers learning to move when up and down stopped meaning anything. Most species needed mag boots or propulsion packs to navigate without gravity. Humans just needed anger and a reason not to quit. She had both. The promise she made to her daughter wasn't just words. It was a chain wrapped around her spine, pulling her forward even when her lungs burned and her muscles screamed. She had told Emma she would come home. She had looked into those 7-year-old eyes and promised that nothing in the galaxy would stop her. And Kai Mercer did not break promises to her daughter. The duct branched in 3 directions. Kai paused, pressing her ear against the metal. Listening, voices echoed from below. Zelthian language, harsh and clipped. She followed the sound, crawling through the darkness with the patience of something that had learned to hunt in worse conditions. The duct opened into a larger maintenance shaft, and there, 15 meters below, a Zelthian enforcer stood guard at a junction point. He was alone. Mistake number 1. Kai studied him for 10 seconds. Zelthians wore exoskeleton armor because their natural bodies were fragile, built for speed rather than strength. The armor had 3 joint points: neck, lower spine, and knees. The knee joints were reinforced. The neck was protected by a collar, but the lower spine joint was exposed, designed to flex when they crouched. Mistake number 2. She dropped without a sound. 15 meters in zero gravity, falling like a stone wrapped in silence. The enforcer didn't hear her, didn't see her, didn't know death was coming until Kai's boots hit his shoulders and her hands found the spine joint. She hooked her fingers into the gap, braced her feet against his shoulder blades, and pulled. Physics did the rest. The joint snapped with a wet crack, and the enforcer collapsed, his legs useless, his voice dying in his throat before he could scream. Kai caught his body, lowered it gently to the floor, and checked his equipment. No weapons. Per station protocol. Just a cum unit, a breaching tool, and a respirator unit clipped to his belt. She took the cum unit and the respirator, leaving the body in the shadows where no one would find it for hours. Her hands were steady, her heartbeat was calm. She had done worse things in worse places, and she would do them again if it meant getting home. The second enforcer was easier. He was checking a sealed door, his back turned, his attention focused on the lock mechanism. Kai approached from behind, moving through the zero gravity like a predator that had evolved in the dark. She didn't use his spine this time. She used his own respirator tube, wrapping it around his throat and pulling tight until his struggles stopped and his body went limp. She took his cum unit too, and then she kept moving. The third enforcer was talking to someone over his cum when Kai found him. He was young, nervous, his hands shaking as he reported his position to the command team in the council chamber. Kai waited until he finished talking, waited until he clipped the cum back to his belt, and then she stepped out of the shadows and looked him in the eyes. He saw her for exactly 2 seconds before she struck. 2 seconds to register the burn scars on her knuckles. The cold absence of fear in her expression. The way she moved like gravity was optional. He opened his mouth to scream. Kai's palm hit his throat, collapsing his windpipe, and the scream died before it could form. She caught his cum unit as he fell, scrolling through the message logs with her thumb. 23 enforcers total. 12 in the council chamber with the hostages. 11 spread throughout the station as security. She had just killed 3. That left 8 more hunting her, and 12 holding a room full of diplomats at gunpoint. The math was ugly, but Kai had faced worse odds. She opened a broadcast channel on the stolen cum, her voice low and steady, and spoke for words that would echo through the station's history. "You have 20 minutes, static crackled. Then a voice responded, rough and amused. Kreeth himself, the warlord holding the dead man's switch. 20 minutes for what, little human? Kai smiled, and it was the same smile that never reached her eyes. To surrender. After that, I stopped being polite. The laughter that came through the cum was sharp and mocking. Kreeth said something in Zelthian and the other enforcers joined in, their voices layered with contempt. They thought she was bluffing. They thought she was alone, unarmed, helpless. They thought the weapons ban meant she was harmless. Kai ended the transmission and checked the chronometer on the cum unit. 19 minutes left. She turned and disappeared back into the ductwork, moving faster now, because the galaxy was about to learn something that Earth's military had known for centuries. You didn't need a gun to be dangerous. You just needed to understand that everything was a weapon if you were creative enough. Vorath watched the security feeds in the command hub, his 4 hands frozen over the controls, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. 3 enforcers down, 3 bodies appearing on the internal scanners like ghosts materializing from nothing. The first one had a snapped spine. The second had died from asphyxiation. The third had a crushed windpipe. No energy signatures, no ballistic residue, no trace of any weapon except the human herself. One of his officers, a young Rithian female, turned to him with her scales pale and trembling. "Sir, how is she doing this?" "She had nothing. We scanned her. We stripped her of everything." Vorath's mandibles clicked, and the sound was hollow. "We stripped her of tools. We didn't strip her of knowledge." "Knowledge?" The officer's voice cracked. "What kind of knowledge kills like that?" Vorath pulled up Kai Mercer's file again, scrolling past the surface details to the sections he had skimmed the first time. Military service record, Earth's Special Operations Division. 12 years of deployment in hostile environments. Survival training in zero atmosphere. Hand-to-hand combat specialist. The file used a phrase Vorath hadn't understood until now. Adaptive lethality. The ability to kill with anything, anywhere, under any conditions. He looked back at the screens. The bodies were still there, cooling in the shadows. And somewhere in the station's guts, Kai Mercer was moving toward the council chamber like a storm that couldn't be stopped. Vorath had spent 14 years believing that banning weapons made beings safe. He was starting to understand that he had been catastrophically wrong. Weapons were objects, but humans were something else entirely. The 4th enforcer died in a maintenance corridor, strangled with a section of fiber optic cable that Kai ripped from the wall. The 5th died when she triggered an emergency bulkhead seal, crushing him between 2 tons of reinforced steel. The 6th tried to run. Kai caught him in a zero-gravity junction, used his own momentum against him, and slammed his helmet into a support beam hard enough to crack both. By the time the 7th enforcer realized he was being hunted, it was already too late. He barricaded himself in a storage room, screaming into his cum for backup, and Kai simply cut the air supply to the room and waited. 3 minutes later, he opened the door, gasping for oxygen, and she was standing there with that faint smile and those scarred knuckles. He didn't even have time to raise his hands. The 8th enforcer was smarter. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He went straight to the council chamber and told Kreeth what was happening. Kai listened to the conversation over the stolen cum, crouched in a duct directly above the chamber, her breath steady and her mind calculating angles. Kreeth's voice was no longer amused. It was tight, controlled, laced with something Kai recognized because she had heard it 1,000 times before. Fear. How many? Kreeth demanded. 8 confirmed dead. Sir. No visual on the human. No weapon signatures. She's using the station itself. Kreeth was silent for 5 seconds. Then he spoke again, and this time his voice carried across the entire station. Human, I know you're listening. You've made your point. But if you take one more step toward this chamber, I detonate the device. 200 lives gone. Can you live with that? Kai closed her eyes. She thought about Emma, about the drawing tucked in her jacket pocket, a crayon sketch of the two of them holding hands under a yellow sun. She thought about the promise she had made and the weight of 200 lives balanced against one. The math was simple. The choice was impossible. She opened the comm channel one last time. Her voice was calm, steady, and colder than the vacuum outside the station. You're right. I can't live with that. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to let the hostages go. You're going to surrender. And if you don't, I'm going to show you what a human does when she stops being polite. Kreith laughed, but it was brittle now, cracking at the edges. You're bluffing. You have no leverage, no weapons, no backup. You're alone. Kai looked down through the vent grating at the council chamber below. She could see the hostages huddled against the walls, the enforcers standing guard, and Kreith in the center with the dead man's switch glowing red in his hand. She could see the kinetic grenade on his belt, armed and ready to erase everyone in the room. And she could see the air circulation vents, the power conduits, the structural weak points that the station's architects never thought anyone would exploit. She smiled, and this time it was the smile of someone who had just realized she was holding all the cards. You're wrong about three things, Kreith. I'm not bluffing, I'm not alone, and I'm not unarmed. I'm standing inside the biggest weapon you've ever seen. It's called Zenith Accord, and I know exactly how to use it. She cut the comm, pulled herself deeper into the ductwork and began counting the seconds until the galaxy learned what it meant to corner a human who had nothing left to lose except a promise to her daughter. Kai reached the council chamber's outer perimeter 23 minutes after she had given Kreith his deadline. She was crouched in a maintenance shaft 3 meters above the chamber's primary blast door, her fingers gripping a support beam, her breath coming slow and controlled. 8 enforcers dead, 12 left inside with the hostages. The math was still ugly, but she had faced worse. She had survived worse. She would do it again. Then Kreith's voice crackled through the stolen comm unit clipped to her belt, and everything changed. His tone was different now. Not afraid, not angry, just calm, controlled, and laced with the kind of certainty that made Kai's blood turn cold. He wasn't talking to his enforcers anymore. He was talking directly to her. Kai Mercer, born in Seattle, former Special Operations, honorably discharged 3 years ago after the Proxima incident. One daughter, Emma Mercer, age 7, currently attending primary school on Earth, approximately 47 light-years from this station. Do I have your attention now? Kai's hands tightened on the beam. Her daughter's name in that voice, spoken with that casual cruelty, hit her like a physical blow. She forced herself to breathe, forced herself to think. He was trying to rattle her, trying to make her sloppy. But the fact that he knew Emma's name meant he had done research. Meant he had planned this, meant this wasn't just about the council, Kreith continued, and now there was a smile in his voice. I know you're listening, I know you're close, and I know you think you can stop me. But here's what you don't know. This isn't just a hostage situation. This is a message, and you're going to deliver it for me. Kai pulled the comm from her belt, her thumb hovering over the transmit button. She didn't press it. She waited. Let him talk. Let him think he had control. People made mistakes when they thought they were winning. The kinetic device I'm holding isn't just a bomb, Kreith said. It's a sensor relay. Every heartbeat, every breath, every energy signature in this room is being transmitted to 3 ships waiting at the edge of this system. And those ships have their weapons locked on a very specific target. Would you like to guess where Kai's vision narrowed? The cold that had been creeping through her veins turned to ice. She knew the answer before he said it. She had known the moment he spoke Emma's name. But hearing it out loud was different. Hearing it made it real. Earth, Kreith said, and the word hung in the air like a death sentence. Specifically, the western coast of your North American continent. Seattle, your daughter's school. If this device detonates, if my heart stops, if any of my people fail to report in at their scheduled intervals, those ships fire. Your planet doesn't have orbital defenses yet. Your species is too new, too naive, too trusting. The weapons will reach the surface in under 4 minutes, and by the time your military responds, 200,000 of your people will be ash, including Emma. Kai's hand was shaking. She stared at it, at the burn scars on her knuckles, at the tremor she couldn't control. She had been shot, stabbed, thrown out of aircraft, and dragged through fire. She had faced death 100 times and never flinched. But this was different. This wasn't her life on the line. This was Emma's, this was everything. So here's the deal, Kreith continued. You surrender. You walk into this chamber, unarmed and compliant. You let me put a bullet in your head in front of every delegate in this room, and in exchange, I let the hostages go. I call off the ships. Your daughter gets to grow up, your planet stays intact. You get to die knowing you saved them all. That's the trade. You have 5 minutes to decide. The comm went silent. Kai pressed her forehead against the cold metal of the support beam, her eyes closed, her mind racing. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the drawing Emma had given her the night before. She left Earth. It was wrinkled now, creased from being carried in her pocket for days. The crayon lines were smudged, but she could still see it clearly. 2 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun, one tall, one small. The words "Come home, Mom" written in uneven letters across the top. She had promised Emma she would come home. She had looked into those 7-year-old eyes and sworn that nothing in the galaxy would stop her, but she hadn't considered this. She hadn't considered a choice where coming home meant letting 200 beings die and her planet burn. She hadn't considered a choice where keeping her promise meant breaking every other promise she had ever made. Kai's drill instructor had told her something 15 years ago, back when she was young and angry and stupid enough to think war was glorious. They had been in a trench on some colony world she couldn't even remember the name of anymore, surrounded by enemies, out of ammunition, waiting for death. And the instructor, a grizzled man with scars older than Kai's career, had looked at her and said 6 words that had kept her alive ever since. A human with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous thing in the universe. Kai opened her eyes. She looked at the drawing one more time, memorizing every line, every smudge, every crooked letter. Then she folded it carefully, tucked it back into her pocket, and pulled up the station's environmental control interface on the stolen comm unit. Her hands were steady now. Her heartbeat was calm, because she had just realized something that Kreeth hadn't counted on. She wasn't surrendering, she was choosing. The emergency decompression sequence was buried 3 layers deep in the station's safety protocols. Designed to be used only in catastrophic hull failures when venting atmosphere was the only way to prevent a chain reaction. Activating it required command authorization, biometric confirmation, and a 30-second countdown. Kai had none of those things, but she had spent the last hour crawling through the station's guts, and she had seen the manual override panel in the maintenance shaft 2 sections back. She moved fast, pulling herself through the ductwork with the kind of speed that only came from desperation and purpose. The panel was right where she remembered it, a simple mechanical system that couldn't be hacked or overridden remotely. She ripped the cover off, exposing the manual release lever. Red warning labels covered the panel in 6 different languages, all saying the same thing: do not use unless authorized. Explosive decompression will occur. Personnel in affected areas will be lost. Kai pulled the lever. The station's alarms screamed to life, a piercing wail that echoed through every corridor, every chamber, every duct. Emergency lights flashed red, painting the world in the color of blood and fire. The automated voice that followed was calm, clinical, and utterly terrifying. Emergency decompression initiated. Outer ring venting in 30 seconds. All personnel evacuate to inner ring immediately. This is not a drill. Voreth's voice exploded through the station-wide comm, frantic and disbelieving. Who authorized this? Shut it down now. But it was too late. The sequence had started, and there was no stopping it. Kai pulled herself back toward the council chamber, her lungs burning, her muscles screaming, because she had exactly 30 seconds to get into position. 30 seconds before the outer ring, including the section she was in, vented into space. 30 seconds before she died, she could hear Kreeth shouting orders inside the chamber, his voice tight with panic. The kinetic bomb he was holding had sensors that monitored pressure, temperature, and electromagnetic fields. A decompression event would trigger all 3. The bomb would think the chamber was breaching. It would detonate. Unless Kai's theory was correct, the station's decompression system was designed to vent atmosphere in controlled bursts, section by section, to prevent catastrophic structural failure. Each burst lasted exactly 3 seconds. And during those 3 seconds, every sensor in the affected area would be overwhelmed by the sudden pressure drop, the temperature shift, the electromagnetic interference from the emergency systems, including the bomb's sensors. 3 seconds of blindness. 3 seconds where the bomb couldn't tell if it was being tampered with. 3 seconds where Kai could breach the chamber, neutralize Kreeth, and save the hostages, or die trying. The countdown hit 10 seconds. Kai positioned herself directly above the council chamber's observation window, a reinforced pane of transparent aluminum designed to withstand micrometeorite impacts. It wouldn't withstand her, not if she hit it hard enough, not if she used every ounce of strength and momentum she had left. 5 seconds she thought about Emma one more time, about the promise she had made, about the words she would never get to say. I'm sorry, baby, I'm so sorry. But you'll understand someday. You'll understand why some promises have to break so that others can be kept. 3 seconds. Kai braced herself, coiled every muscle, and launched herself at the window with everything she had. Her body hit the transparent aluminum like a missile wrapped in flesh and bone. The window cracked. Spiderwebs of fracture lines spread across the surface, but it held. 1 second. The decompression hit. The outer ring exploded outward in a roar of escaping atmosphere, and Kai felt the vacuum tear at her body like invisible hands trying to rip her apart. The cold was immediate, absolute, burning her lungs and freezing the moisture on her skin. The pressure differential shattered the cracked window, and she tumbled through in a shower of glittering fragments, her vision tunneling, her ears screaming, her blood boiling in her veins. She hit the chamber floor hard, rolling with the impact, her body moving on instinct because her conscious mind was too busy trying not to die. The hostages were screaming, the enforcers were shouting, and Kreeth was standing in the center of the room, his eyes wide, his hand still gripping the dead man's switch, staring at the human who had just thrown herself through a window from hard vacuum and was somehow still moving. Kai's lungs were on fire. Her vision was gray at the edges, her body shutting down from decompression exposure. She had maybe 10 seconds of consciousness left, maybe less, but 10 seconds was enough. 10 seconds was a lifetime when you knew exactly how to use it. She pushed herself to her feet, swaying, blood leaking from her nose and ears, her skin pale and mottled from burst capillaries. She looked at Kreeth, and her smile was the same smile that had never reached her eyes, except now it did. Now it reached all the way to her soul, cold and dark and utterly without mercy. "You were right about one thing," she said, her voice a rasping whisper. "A human with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous thing in the universe. And you just took everything." Kreeth raised his weapon, his finger tightening on the trigger. But Kai was already moving, and the galaxy was about to learn what happened when you backed a human into a corner and made her choose between her daughter and the stars. Kai hit the council chamber floor and the universe narrowed to a single point of clarity. Her body was dying. She could feel it in the way her lungs refused to inflate properly, in the way her vision flickered at the edges, in the way her heart hammered against her ribs like something trying to escape. Decompression, exposure. She had maybe 90 seconds before her brain shut down from oxygen deprivation, maybe less. But 90 seconds was enough. 90 seconds was a lifetime. The breach behind her was screaming atmosphere into space, a howling wind that threatened to tear everything loose. Kai grabbed the nearest Selthian corpse, one of the enforcers she had killed earlier, and dragged it toward the shattered window. The body was heavy, awkward, leaking fluids that froze instantly in the escaping air. She wedged it into the breach, using the enforcer's armor as a plug, and then ripped a section of wall paneling free with her bare hands. The metal shrieked as it tore. She slammed it over the corpse, sealing the breach with a combination of dead flesh and raw determination. The howling stopped. The chamber's emergency systems kicked in, pumping oxygen back into the room, restoring pressure. Kai sucked in a breath that felt like swallowing broken glass. And then another and another, until her vision cleared enough to see. The hostages were pressed against the far wall, 200 beings from 47 species, staring at her with expressions that ranged from terror to disbelief. The Zelthian enforcers had their weapons raised, but none of them were firing. They were too busy trying to process what they had just witnessed. And in the center of the room, Kreeth stood with the dead man's switch glowing red in his hand and a weapon pointed directly at Kai's chest. His face was twisted with rage and something else, something that looked like fear. He had threatened her daughter. He had put a gun to Earth's head, and now he was staring at the human who had walked through vacuum to get to him, and he was realizing that he had made a catastrophic miscalculation. "You should be dead," Kreeth said, his voice shaking. "The decompression should have killed you." Kai smiled, and blood leaked from between her teeth. "Humans don't die easy. We're stubborn like that." Kreeth's finger tightened on the trigger. "It doesn't matter. You're unarmed. You're injured. You can barely stand. And I still have this." He raised the dead man's switch. "One wrong move, and everyone in this room dies. Including you." Kai took a step forward. Her legs were trembling, her body screaming at her to stop, to rest, to give up. She ignored it. She had spent 15 years learning to ignore pain, to push past limits that would break other species. Pain was just information. And right now it was telling her that she was still alive, still moving, still dangerous. "You're right," Kai said. "I'm unarmed. I'm injured. I can barely stand. But you know what? I don't need to be at full strength to end you. I just need to be strong enough." She moved, not toward Kreeth, but sideways, using the chamber's reduced gravity to push off the floor in a shallow arc. Kreeth fired, but the shot went wide, hitting the wall behind where Kai had been standing. She landed on the back of a delegate's chair, crouched like a predator, and then launched herself again before Kreeth could adjust his aim. The chamber had been designed for diplomatic comfort, with chairs, tables, observation platforms. To most species, it was furniture. To Kai, it was a three-dimensional battlefield. She ricocheted off a wall, twisted in midair, and landed on a support beam near the ceiling. Kreeth fired again, and the energy bolt scorched the metal inches from her hand. She didn't flinch. She pushed off the beam, flipped over a cluster of terrified delegates, and came down on a table that collapsed under her weight. She rolled with the impact, grabbed a broken table leg, and came up moving. Kreeth was turning, trying to track her, his weapon sweeping across the room. But Kai was already inside his firing arc, moving faster than his targeting system could compensate for. She swung the table leg like a club, and it connected with his wrist. The crack of breaking bone echoed through the chamber. The weapon fell from his hand, clattering across the floor. Kreeth screamed, clutching his shattered wrist, but he still had the dead man's switch in his other hand. Kai didn't give him time to think. She hooked her foot behind his knee, used his own weight against him, and drove him to the ground. He hit hard, the air exploding from his lungs, and Kai was on him before he could recover. She grabbed his arm, the one holding the switch, and twisted it behind his back. Not hard enough to break it. Not hard enough to make him drop the switch. Just hard enough to make it clear that she could. "Drop it," Kai said, her voice low and cold. "Drop it or I dislocate your shoulder, then your elbow, then every finger on that hand until you can't hold anything ever again." Kreeth's breath was coming in ragged gasps. He tried to move, tried to throw her off. But Kai had spent a decade learning how to control beings twice her size with nothing but leverage and physics. She applied pressure to his shoulder joint, and he screamed. The sound was raw, primal, and it cut through the silence like a blade. "I said drop it." Kreeth's hand opened. The dead man's switch fell to the floor. the red light still glowing. Kai snatched it up with her free hand, her fingers closing around it carefully, keeping the pressure sensor engaged. If she released it, the bomb would detonate. If she held it wrong, the bomb would detonate. If her hands started shaking from exhaustion and pain, the bomb would detonate. She had just traded one impossible situation for another, but at least now she was the one holding the trigger. Kai stood, dragging Kreeth up with her, keeping his arm locked behind his back. She held him at the edge of the kinetic bomb's blast radius, a 5-meter circle that would turn everything inside it into vapor. The enforcers were still standing around the room, their weapons raised, but none of them were moving. They were waiting, watching, trying to decide if their loyalty to Kreeth was worth dying for. Kai made the decision for them. She looked at the nearest enforcer, a young Zelthian whose hands were shaking, and spoke in a voice that carried across the entire chamber. "Put the weapons down, all of you. Put them down and walk away. You don't have to die for him. You don't have to die at all." The young enforcer hesitated. His eyes flicked to Kreeth, then back to Kai, then to the dead man's switch in her hand. He was doing the math, weighing the odds, and then, slowly he lowered his weapon and placed it on the ground. The enforcer beside him did the same. Then another, then another. Within 30 seconds, every weapon in the room was on the floor, and the enforcers were standing with their hands raised, waiting for orders that Kreeth could no longer give. Voroth's voice crackled through the chamber's comm system, tight with disbelief. "Mercer, what's your status?" Kai looked up at the nearest security camera, her face pale and streaked with blood, her smile sharp enough to cut. "Hostage situation resolved. Chief Warlord in custody. Bomb still active. I'm going to need a disposal team and a medical unit." In that order there was a pause. Then Voroth's voice came back, quieter now, laced with something that might have been respect. "Copy that. Teams are on the way." "Mercer, how did you later?" Kai interrupted. "Right now, I need to talk to the Warlord." She turned Kreeth around so he was facing her, his broken wrist cradled against his chest, his face twisted with pain and rage. She held up the dead man's switch so he could see it, the red light casting shadows across her scarred knuckles. And then she spoke, and her voice was calm, steady, and colder than the vacuum she had just walked through. "You wanted to see what a human does without weapons. We do this, we adapt, we improvise. We turn your station into a weapon, we turn your own people against you. We walk through hard vacuum and we keep moving because that's what humans are. We're not the strongest species, we're not the fastest, we're not the smartest, but we are the most stubborn, the most creative, and the most absolutely relentless beings you will ever meet." Kreeth spat blood, his eyes burning with hatred. "You think you've won? You think this changes anything? My people will come for you, they'll come for your planet, they'll come for your daughter." Kai leaned in close, so close that Kreeth could see his own reflection in her eyes. "Let them try. Because now the galaxy knows what happens when you threaten a human's family. Now they know what we're capable of. And trust me, Warlord, you just made humanity a lot more terrifying than we were yesterday." She stepped back, still holding the dead man's switch, and turned to face the delegates. 200 beings from 47 species huddled against the walls, staring at her with expressions that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Fear, awe, respect, and something else. Something that looked like the moment when the galaxy realized it had underestimated the new species in the room. A Rithian diplomat, an older female with silver scales and intelligent eyes, stepped forward slowly. Her voice was shaking, but it was clear. "Human Mercer, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I offer our gratitude. You saved our lives. You risked everything. We are in your debt." Kai shook her head, her exhaustion finally catching up with her. "I didn't do this for gratitude. I did this because I made a promise to my daughter, and because 200 lives are worth more than my pride." The Rithian diplomat's eyes widened. "You could have killed him. You had every right, every justification. But you didn't. Why?" Kai looked down at Kreeth, still on his knees, still glaring at her with impotent rage. She thought about all the ways she could answer that question. About duty and honor and the rules of war. About the difference between humans and monsters. But in the end, she chose the simplest truth, because humanity's greatest weapon isn't violence. It's the choice to wield it with precision. We're dangerous when we have to be, but we're terrifying when we choose not to be. She handed the dead man's switch to Vorath, who had just entered the chamber with a disposal team. Her hand was shaking now, the adrenaline wearing off, her body finally admitting that it was about to collapse. Vorath took the switch carefully, his 4 hands moving with the practiced precision of someone who had disarmed 1,000 devices. His mandibles clicked once, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet. "I owe you an apology, Mercer. I thought the weapons ban made us safe. I thought removing the tools removed the danger. I was wrong." Kai's vision was starting to gray at the edges again. She could hear medical teams rushing into the chamber, could feel hands steadying her as her legs gave out. But before the darkness took her, she looked at Vorath and managed one last smile. The smile that never reached her eyes. Except this time, just for a moment, it did. "You weren't wrong, Chief. You just forgot one thing. Humans don't need weapons to be dangerous. We are the weapon. We always have been. And the galaxy better get used to it because we're not going anywhere." She collapsed into the arms of the medical team, unconscious before she hit the ground. leaving behind a council chamber full of beings who would spend the rest of their lives trying to understand what they had just witnessed. And in the security hub, Vorath pulled up Kai Mercer's file one more time, scrolling to the section he had skimmed before. The section about humanity's place in the galaxy. The section that ended with a single line that he would never forget. Recommendation: do not underestimate them, ever. Kai Mercer walked out of Zenith Accord 3 days later, and the galaxy held its breath. She had spent those 3 days in the medical wing, recovering from decompression exposure, broken ribs, internal bleeding, and a list of injuries long enough to kill most species twice over. The doctors, a mix of Rithian physiologists and human medics who had arrived on an emergency transport, had told her she should be dead. Kai had just smiled that smile that never reached her eyes and said she had a daughter waiting. The council chamber had been repaired, the breach sealed, the bodies removed, but the blood was still there, soaked into the metal, invisible to scanners but present in the memory of every being who had been in that room. 200 delegates had walked out alive because of her. 8 Zelthian enforcers had died because of her. The galaxy wasn't sure which fact was more terrifying. Vorath met her at the airlock, the same place where she had entered the station 4 days ago. He stood with all 4 arms crossed behind his back, his chitinous plates gleaming under the sterile lights, and for a long moment, he said nothing, just looked at her, at the bandages wrapped around her torso, at the burn scars on her knuckles, at the faint smile that never changed. The Galactic Council has reviewed your actions, Vorath said finally. All charges have been dropped. You acted in defense of Council personnel. Your conduct has been deemed heroic, exemplary. They want to offer you a position. Kai raised an eyebrow. What kind of position? First human security liaison to the Council. You would advise on human integration, train security personnel in human capabilities, help establish protocols for future incidents involving your species. The pay is excellent. The prestige is unmatched. You would be the face of humanity in Council space. Kai laughed, and the sound was bitter. I'm not interested in being a face. I'm not interested in prestige. I'm interested in going home to my daughter and never setting foot on another station as long as I live. Vorath's mandibles clicked, a sound of understanding. I thought you might say that I had to offer. The Council is grateful. More than you know. Grateful enough to let me leave without a medal ceremony or a press conference. Already arranged. Your transport departs in 20 minutes. Direct route to Earth, no stops, no delays. Kai nodded, adjusting the strap of the small bag slung over her shoulder. Everything she owned fit inside it. Everything that mattered, anyway. She started toward the airlock, then paused and looked back at Vorath. Chief, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you still think the weapons ban works? Vorath was silent for a long time. His 4 hands moved to his sides, a gesture of openness and Kryn culture. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than she had ever heard it. I think the weapons ban was designed for a galaxy that didn't include humans. I think we built our entire civilization on the assumption that violence required tools. And I think you proved that assumption was catastrophically wrong. Kai's smile widened just a fraction. Good, then maybe the galaxy will learn something from this. Maybe they'll stop thinking about weapons and start thinking about people. Because the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't a gun or a bomb. It's someone who knows exactly what they're fighting for. She turned and walked through the airlock without looking back, leaving Vorath standing alone in the corridor, wondering if humanity's entry into galactic politics was going to be a blessing or a war waiting to happen. Maybe both. The transport ride back to Earth took 6 days. Kai spent most of it sleeping, her body finally allowing itself to recover now that the danger was past. When she wasn't sleeping, she was staring out the viewport at the stars, thinking about the drawing in her jacket pocket, about Emma's face, about the promise she had kept at a cost she was still calculating. She had killed 8 beings. She had nearly died herself. And she had proven to the galaxy that humanity was something they needed to take seriously. She wasn't sure how she felt about that. Pride, maybe, or guilt, or just exhaustion so deep it felt like a weight pressing down on her bones. But the moment the transport dropped out of faster-than-light travel and Earth appeared in the viewport, blue and green and impossibly beautiful, everything else fell away. She was home. She had kept her promise. And for now, that was enough. Emma was waiting at the spaceport in Seattle, holding her grandmother's hand, bouncing on her toes with barely contained energy. The moment Kai stepped through the arrivals gate, Emma broke free and ran, her 7-year-old legs carrying her as fast as they could. Kai dropped to her knees and caught her daughter in her arms, pulling her close, breathing in the smell of strawberry shampoo and childhood and everything she had been fighting to get back to. You came home, Emma whispered into Kai's shoulder, her voice thick with tears. You promised and you came home. Kai's eyes burned, but she didn't let herself cry. Not here, not now. She just held her daughter tighter and whispered back, I always keep my promises, baby, always. They stayed like that for a long time. 2 figures in the middle of a crowded spaceport, the galaxy spinning around them, and for once in her life, Kai Mercer let herself feel safe. But the galaxy didn't forget. The galaxy never forgets. Within a year, 19 species rewrote their combat doctrines to include a section labeled unarmed human variables, Military academies across a dozen star systems began teaching case studies on the Zenith Accord incident, analyzing Kai's tactics, her improvisation, her ruthless efficiency. The consensus was terrifying and unanimous. Humans without weapons were more dangerous than most species with them, because humans didn't need tools to be lethal, they needed motivation. The Galactic Council created a new treaty clause in the aftermath of the incident. It was officially titled Addendum 7 to the Zenith Protocols, but everyone called it the Mercer Protocol. Any station claiming to be weapons-free now had to explicitly define what constituted a weapon, and the definition had to account for species that could weaponize their own biology, their environment, or their creativity. It was a bureaucratic way of admitting what Vorath had learned the hard way. You couldn't ban violence, you could only ban objects, and some species didn't need objects. Human applications to the Galactic Council tripled in the year following Zenith Accord. Some species saw humanity as a valuable ally, others saw them as a threat that needed to be monitored, but everyone agreed on one thing. Humanity was no longer a footnote in galactic history. They were a chapter that was just beginning, and no one knew how it would end. Kai heard about the Mercer Protocol 6 months after she returned to Earth. A reporter had tracked her down, shown up at her apartment with a camera crew and a list of questions. Kai had closed the door in their face without saying a word. She wasn't interested in being famous. She wasn't interested in becoming a symbol. She just wanted to teach Emma how to ride a bike and make breakfast without burning the toast and live a life that didn't involve walking through vacuum. But the reporter's questions had stayed with her. One in particular: do you think humanity is ready for the responsibility that comes with being feared? Kai didn't have an answer. She wasn't sure anyone did. Vorath visited Earth once, 8 months after the incident. He didn't announce his arrival, didn't go through official channels. He just took a personal transport down to Seattle, walked through the city until he found the park where Kai spent her afternoons, and stood at a distance, watching. She was sitting on a bench in the sunlight, her daughter beside her, teaching her how to tie her shoes. The scene was so mundane, so peaceful, that it was hard to reconcile with the woman who had walked through hard vacuum and killed 8 beings with her bare hands. He approached slowly, his forearms folded behind his back, his movements careful and non-threatening. Kai looked up when he was 10 meters away, and her expression didn't change. Just that faint smile that never reached her eyes. She said something to Emma, who ran off to play on the swings, and then she gestured for Vorath to sit. He did, his kitten's frame awkward on the human-sized bench. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just watched Emma play, the sound of her laughter bright and clear in the afternoon air. Then Vorath broke the silence with the question that had haunted him for months. How did you know you'd survive? Kai didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on Emma, on the way the sunlight caught in her daughter's hair, on the joy in her movements. When she answered, her voice was quiet but steady. I didn't. Vorath's mandibles clicked. Then why did you do it? Because my daughter deserved a galaxy where humans don't have to prove they're dangerous, where we can just be people, where we can tie our shoes in the sunlight and not worry about whether some warlord is going to put a gun to our heads. She turned to look at him then, and for the first time, Vorath saw something in her eyes that he hadn't seen before. Not anger, not fear, just a quiet, unshakable determination. I didn't walk through vacuum because I wanted to. I did it because someone had to show the galaxy that humans are worth taking seriously, that we're not just another species to push around. And if that meant risking my life, then that's what it meant. Vorath was silent. He thought about the weapons ban, about the protocols he had spent 14 years enforcing, about the assumptions he had built his entire career on. And he realized that Kai Mercer had torn all of it down in less than an hour. Not because she was trying to prove a point, but because she loved her daughter more than she feared death. You terrify me, Vorath said finally. Not because of what you did, but because of why you did it. Kai's smile widened just a fraction. Good, maybe the galaxy needs to be a little terrified. Keeps them honest. Vorath stood, preparing to leave. But before he did, he looked down at Kai one more time and said the words that had been building in him since the moment he watched her walk through that airlock 3 days after the incident. Humanity is going to change the galaxy. Mercer, whether we're ready for it or not. Kai watched Emma on the swings, her laughter bright and free, and she thought about all the ways that sentence could be true, all the ways it could go right, all the ways it could go catastrophically wrong. And then she thought about the promise she had made, the one she had kept, the one that mattered more than anything the galaxy could throw at her. Then I guess the galaxy better hold on tight, Kai said. Because we're not slowing down for anyone. Vorath walked away, leaving Kai alone on the bench, and as he disappeared into the crowd, he finally understood the most terrifying truth in the cosmos. Humans weren't dangerous because they were strong. They weren't dangerous because they were clever. They were dangerous because they knew exactly what they were fighting for, and there was no weapon in the galaxy more powerful than that. Years later, when historians wrote about the Zenith Accord incident, they would focus on the tactics, the improvisation, the sheer audacity of what Kai Mercer had done, but they would miss the real lesson. They would miss the moment when the galaxy realized that humanity's greatest strength wasn't violence or creativity or resilience. It was the capacity to choose, to decide what mattered, to draw a line and say this far and no further, to walk through hell barefoot if it meant protecting the people they loved. The Galactic Council banned weapons. But they forgot to ban the one thing that made humans truly dangerous. They forgot to ban hope. They forgot to ban love. They forgot to ban the kind of stubborn, relentless, unbreakable determination that turned ordinary people into legends. And by the time they realized their mistake, humanity was already rewriting the rules. Kai Mercer never became a symbol, never gave interviews, never returned to council space. She just lived her life, taught her daughter to tie her shoes and ride a bike and ask questions about the stars. But her name became something else, a warning, a promise, a reminder that the galaxy's newest species was not to be underestimated ever. Because humans didn't need weapons to be dangerous, they just needed a reason, and the galaxy had given them plenty. If you want more stories of humanity rewriting the galaxy's rules, one impossible act at a time, subscribe, because this is just the beginning. The galaxy thought it understood violence, thought it understood war, thought it understood danger. And then humanity showed up and proved that the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't the weapon you carry, it's the reason you fight. And humans always know exactly what they're fighting for.